Hello there, Art Fam. Today I'm posting a video that has been sitting in my editing pile for about a year, and I'm finally getting around to posting it. So I'm going to show you here my full process on how to take a small stamped image and turn it into a larger Art Nouveau style painting. This is my full process and how to do it. So I'm holding here the stamp that I used. It's called Miss You Lots by W+9. It's a 2014 stamp and it's very small. It's like 3.5 inches or 4 inches tall. And I wanted to make a painting out of it for my mother's birthday, and her name is Marguerite, which is French for Daisy. And her mother, my grandmother's name was Daisy. So Daisy's running the family. So I wanted to do something around daisies, and Art Nouveau is both of our favorite styles of art. So I decided to enlarge this stamp because it kind of looked like my mother as a little girl. So I gave her the same hair that she had and her liquid crystal green blue eyes. So if you have this stamp, or if you want to go out and buy it, I'll put as many links as I can to the products that I use and my equipment in the information bar down below, and please use them. It gives me a small commission. So what I did was I stamped out the image and I transferred it into Photoshop and I made a design. So I'm not going to show you how to do that because that's a whole other video, but basically I just picked apart, stock art. I drew some elements myself. I found a font that's Art Nouveau, and I stamped out the image, took a picture with my phone, and then, chucked it into Photoshop. So you kind of have to maybe be a little proficient with Photoshop or an editing program to design it all out, but you could probably do it by hand, just sketching it out too, if you want. So here I am with my light table, and I'm transferring. So I printed it out, my design. I got my design all how I wanted it in Photoshop, and it looks really crusty and crappy in there. Like as I lift up the paper, you can see it's sort of unfinished, and I knew that I'd be, tweaking it as I inked it. So I'm just tracing over the Art Nouveau elements here that I cobbled together, and I'm lifting it up because it's actually hard to see through that thicker watercolor paper. And the watercolor paper I'm using, I think it's 7 by 9 inches, but it's not the highest quality watercolor paper either. It's Fabriano, like the 25% cotton kind. And I'm just transferring the drawing with my black Micron archival ink pen. I keep lifting up the watercolor paper because I really can't see very well, even though it's a great light table. The lines are not very crisp because I scaled up the image a lot in Photoshop. So I mean, it is crisp, but some of the background elements aren't the highest quality, so they're a little less crisp. But you see the elements behind the girl. That's just an idea of sort of daisies and whatever. In the end, I end up just freehand painting them. I'm not inking those because in the Art Nouveau style, some of the lines are there and others are more just like a sort of faded watercolor look. So I'm just putting in the main elements at this time, and I end up just sort of painting the background in that sort of washed out watercolor Art Nouveau style later. So obviously the trick to get a smaller stamp into a larger painting is to stamp it out, take a picture of it, get it into Photoshop into a digital copy, and enlarge it into your design, and then print it out. So something that's really going to make this painting is the font that you choose. So you want to get a nice Art Nouveau style font, and I laid out the perfect one that I love here, and I've gone into real time for the video just to show you how long this process takes. And you see how the photo, even the printing, is a really crusty, you see that? It's just a crusty, not the highest quality, but I really just wanted an idea because Art Nouveau is very organic and not perfect and handcrafted with round flowing edges, very feminine. So I don't want it to be perfect. I want it to be hand drawn just like this. And so I'm speeding back up again just because you don't need to see all of the real-time video. But I wish I could remember the font that I used here to tell you what it is. But just search Art Nouveau fonts and find yourself a font that you really like. Art Nouveau is my favorite style, and I think it's my mother's too. She had lots of paintings when I was growing up on the walls. And so you want thick lines, like I've written my mother's name, Marguerite, here, and then long, flowy, undulating, feminine, round, curvy lines. And that's what I love about it. Okay, so we're finished with the line work. I've turned my light table off. I'll have a link to that in the description box below. And now I've got out my Winsor & Newton Frisket, which is art masking fluid. And you want to use sort of a crappy brush for this. I'm just using an old cheap brush. And you want to wet it and maybe put a little bit of dish soap on it as well first to protect it. And although I never have problems with this stuff with my brushes because I always just keep it on the tip really, I don't get it into the ferrule or anything. So I'm just painting on the areas. These are going to be daisies, the stylized daisies in the outer frame. And I'm painting all that on. This is real time, and sorry about the washed out video here. I don't know what happened. This video is like a year old actually. So it's not the best quality. I have a better phone. It's amazing how they have better quality videos every single year. And I painted the frisket on the stylized daisies on the outside because I'm gonna do ink all over the edges. I'm actually using Tim Holtz Distress ink actually. And here I'm just freestyling in the daisies. So I have a picture in my mind. It's similar to what I had in my design, but I just knew it was gonna be like just a field on a hill with daisies. Just very simple, blue clear sky with daisies behind her. Her name's Marguerite, which is Francais for daisy. And like I said, my grandmother's name was Daisy, so it just runs in the family, and I love daisies. So I'm just freestyling those daisies in here, and I can envision in my mind how it will turn out, but it's so satisfying when you rub this frisket off and you see what you actually painted. Okay, here we have a little better light here. I'm liking this. So I just spritz down the watercolor paper with water, and then I dry it with my heat tool. And then I spritz it down again and dry it. So this is to sort of prepare the watercolor paper so it doesn't warp so much. So see how it warps up? And then as I dry it, it sort of goes back down again. So that's sort of preparing the paper before I get the water or ink on there. And then I'm taping it down with painter's tape. And I'm using, that's Victorian Velvet Distress ink. And I also use Shabby Shutters and the Forest Lawn one. And the other one I use is Spun Sugar in this outside rim. But what I really like about this Victorian velvet is it's just such a muted, it just reminds me of an old Victorian velvet, smoky purple velvet dress, you know. So I wanted it that style, and then that muted pink with a muted green, or just the greens and the vines, I just love. So that's what I had in my head. A Victorian velvet, sort of a muted smoky pink with greens, a little daisy field, and then pops of white daisy around the edges. So as you can see, I'm not painting in normal watercolor fashion. I'm using sort of the technique that the crafty ladies do, and I'm using that Tim Holtz ink blending tool. And right now I'm just blending sponge sugar with Victorian velvet, and I just keep putting on layer after layer, spraying it with water, and eventually I sprinkle water. And the good thing about this distress ink, it's really an interesting ink in that you can sort of sprinkle it with that seedless preserves, that purple color that I'm blending into it. I realized I wanted it darker, like a vignette around the edges, so I bring in that purple, and I really love that color. Victorian velvet and seedless preserves together is just, I love that combination. And so I was just saying about the distress ink that you can, you know, spray it, put some water on your fingers and sort of sprinkle the water on there. Let it sit for 10 or 20 seconds and then dab it off. See, as I'm doing here, so I'm bringing out the daisies. I want them white again. So I'm just taking a bit of water on that area and then dabbing it off. So the ink really does that nicely. And here I'm taking the water, putting it in my hands, and then sprinkling it on because I want a distressed droplet look. So I'll let that sit for 20-30 seconds, and then I take my paper towel and I dab it off, and it gives a nice mottled, distressed old Victorian look. Okay, now I start to get into painting. So now I have my watercolors. These are my Schmincke watercolor palette, and I love them. They're one of my favorites. My favorites are Daniel Smith and my Schmincke paints, my top favorites. So I'm just painting her hair here. My mother as a child was sort of very dark blonde, light brown with a bit of red in there. It's funny, she went gray when she was 16. So anyway, but when she was a child, she had those light blue-green, sea foam blue-green eyes. She still does. And so I'm painting her as a child with a little kitten, because they had a gray kitten she remembers called Smokey. So as you can see, I'm playing very fast and loose here with the watercolor. I wet the whole area, and then I'm just dabbing in. The first layer is just dabbing in lights and darks and establishing those tones. And then later I'll go in with a little bit drier paint and sort of pick out the dark spots, you know, do little flicks where the roots are and bring out the dark under layers. And then at the very end, I bring out some highlights. So I decided to paint the dress in seedless preserves as well. So that's kind of like a look of the Art Nouveau style, is everything sort of meshes and melds in together. There's no bright colors. It's very ethereal and soft and smoky, and everything kind of has an undertone of the same color. So that's what I was going for here. That's why her dress pretty much matches the outer color of the frame. So I can't find the footage of painting the green vines and the leaves around the edge, but I guess I must have lost that footage. But I used the forest green color in the distress ink, another muted color. So I've also got the spun sugar out here again, just to keep it cohesive. And if you want to know what that, I'm just using a craft mat, which you can just put your watercolor swatches. I don't have a palette or anything. I just am smearing that ink right on the craft mat. So it's just an easy way to get the ink right on your paper. It's right next to where you're painting. So I just used another ink, I think it's called Marigold, something marigold color, and I'm going to use that marigold color in the center of the daisies as well. This blue here, I think it's called Faded Jeans, and it's a distress ink stain. I'm pretty sure it's called Faded Jeans, but you see that it's a faded blue jean denim color. I'm going to use that color in the daisies. So when you're painting white, you don't just leave them white. It's actually not white. It's like a very, very light bluish gray. So that's what I'm doing. And then I just bring a little bit of more shadow, a little bit of more blue to create the cool look of white. It's kind of a hard one to wrap your head around, but white flowers aren't white. They're actually a dark grayish blue color. So eventually I will go in and put a little more blue in there. And we have, this is called Shabby Shutters, this green color. It's again muted. That's why I'm using these ink colors, because they're very muted and it's very, very Art Nouveau style. So if you take the same color palette that I have here, you'll end up with a nice Art Nouveau palette, because they're muted colors and they all just seem to go together very nicely. So again, I'm playing very fast and loose here with the background. There's not a lot of detail. Usually in the Art Nouveau paintings, there wasn't a lot of detail in the background like that. It was just very sort of quickly done. So that's what I'm doing with the grass. And then as you can see, the areas of Frisket where I masked out the daisies are starting to pop out, and it looks really cool. I'm really happy with it. So when I say it was quickly done in the background, I didn't mean quickly. I meant more simply, with no overt lines like the front. You see how the front of the painting is sort of brought out by the heavy lines around it, and the background was more of a muted, not so much definition in the background. See, I'm putting that faded jeans or faded denim color into those daisies and then dabbing it right off because it stains. It's a stain. So that's getting like the shadow color in there to imply the white. And then later I'll bring a gel pen to it and get the real light white highlights in there. here I'm laying in the sky and it's super easy. I just wet the area, and because these stains, the background green is staining, it won't lift as I go over it. So I'm just dotting in. First I do a very light wash, and then I dot in just a little more pigment in the top, and that sort of implies clouds and gives a really watercolory, ethereal look. Okay, so here I'm just mixing up a skin color, and I always use the same colors from my Schminke palette. The colors are magenta, which is like a clear, transparent, see-through reddish pink, and Naples Yellow, which has a bit of opacity to it. And then sometimes I throw in a little bit of burnt sienna just for a bit of brownness, depending on the skin color. Or sometimes a tiny bit of orange, depending on if I want to go to a more yellow-based skin tone rather than pink-based. But you just have to get lots of water in there, get a really watery magenta. That's what I start off with. And then I put some Naples Yellow in. And that always just instantly makes a creamy skin tone. Here I'm using that marigold, I think it's called marigold. Or something straw. Anyway, sorry, I can't remember what it's called, but I'm using that for pops of color in the daisies and the cat's collar. So here I've slowed down the video to real time just for a little bit, and I'm removing the frisket. So that's pretty self-explanatory, but it's so satisfying to just remove that and see the bright white paper shine through so that I can have my stylized daisies really bright. So here we are again, removing the frisket on my painted daisies in the field, and I didn't know how they would turn out, but I was so happy to see them turn out that way because I just love the way it looks, and it was just super easy. I mean, anyone can do that. As you see, anyone can do that sky, and then you just make little star-shaped daisies and make some of them flat, make them sort of sideways like that, so it gives the illusion that they're on a sort of rounded hill, a little patch of them. And then you literally just flick in some grass. It's as easy as that. Here I am painting some more skin tone, and as you can see, I didn't mention it before, but one of my favorite techniques is you get it on there and then you dab it off. So what it does is it stains where you put it, so it gives that illusion of the shadow being there. As you can see on her right leg, or her left leg actually, our right. You see how it creates the illusion of a shadow there? You paint on the shadow and then you just dab it off. Going back into real time here because it's just so satisfying putting those little yellow marigold colored centers in those daisies. They just look so beautiful, and don't you just love that when you're putting on the little final touches and it just really makes it all come together? That's my favorite part of the painting. So I'll just mention again, she's in the dress that's the exact same color as the outer side of outer rim of the painting. And that creates that Art Nouveau cohesive look. You know, you don't want too many colors. You want a limited color palette. And again, I'm going in with the shadows after that skin has dried. I'm going in again with a few more shadows and then just dabbing it off. So here's a perfect example of a glaze. The hair was looking very like an ash brown, and my mother was more red, had more red in the hair. So I just took a burnt sienna, very watery glaze, and just put that all over the hair, and that just warms it up and gives it a glow. Also, it wasn't just burnt sienna, there was some of that really bright yellow in there to give that glow. So a nice light muted blue-gray always goes nicely in an Art Nouveau background. When in doubt, use this color because, you know, if you start to get too many colors, you're getting away from the Art Nouveau look. So just a nice neutral bluish gray looks really nice in the background. Okay, now that my painting is pretty much finished, I'm going in with a black Micron archival ink pen and going over all my lines to crisp them up. You can also use a brown sepia colored Micron pen too. That looks beautiful in the Art Nouveau style. And as you can see, I'm doing that thick telltale Art Nouveau line around the center or the main images, and that is one of the real hallmarks of an Art Nouveau work, is that thick line. Okay, here I am really just going over all the lines to crisp them up again, make them really stand out, and just touching up little things here and there that stand out and need fixing. It's the final once-over of the painting stage before I bust out my pencil crayons. And here they are, the pencil crayons. I'm using our Derwent Color Soft, and I slowed this down to real time again just so you could see a little bit of the detail, and as a reminder again of how long this takes. The video is a little washed out with light again. I must have been doing this at night and had the light on, so it has a bit of a shadow, so sorry about that. But at least I filmed this for you, right? So one of my favorite things to do at the pencil crayon stage is, wow, that's really washed out. Sorry about that. But I like to take the skin color pencils and that baby pink color, and I like to sort of bring out the lips and the cheeks, because that's kind of harder to do with paint on the cheeks to get a really soft look. So I love to do that. I love to pick out the highlights in the whites of the eyes, you know, in the corners, and then the sparkle in the eye always really brings the eye to life. And also, this is the place where I pick out the highlights in the hair, and it, you know, just emphasize those curls, the little curl shines. And here I'm just picking out the, again, just using the Micron pen again and bringing out some little details. These little details really, really make the painting, in my opinion. Because if you just bring out a little highlights and details, it tricks the whole eye into thinking that the painting is a lot more detailed than it is. Here's an example of those little tiny details that I was talking about. You see how I just did that with her bangs, her little fringe in her hair there? If you just pick out a few stray hairs and emphasize those, it will just trick the whole eye into thinking that you've painted all of the hair and it's hair. I don't know how to explain that, but just doing those little details, like the shine in the eye and the shine on the boot and the shine on the curl, and drawing a few individual hairs at the edge of the hairline is a trick I love to do, to trick the eye into seeing more detail than there is. And then the final stage for those little white highlights is a pigment ink gel pen, such as a Jelly Roll pen or a Sigma white pen, or you can paint on white gouache. That works well too. Just depends on, you know, what you have. So this is the very final highlights of white. Okay, and we're at the end of my painting. I'm going to sign it here. I gave it to my mother for her birthday and she loved it. So here's just a pan over of some details of the painting and the finished work. I really thank you for watching this video. Drop me a comment below. Give me a like if you like the video. Subscribe if you care to. And you can follow me on Instagram at Andy Designer. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Have a great day.